Hello and welcome to the CAS Virtual Showcase 2021 and this panel session by Mandy Honeyman, James Gardner and Adam Gibson on enhancing progression, assessment and transition in secondary computing. My name is Wendy Piccinini and I am the CAS Outreach Manager for communities in London and the East of England. I'm also the host for this session. Shortly, I will introduce the panelists, but just before I do, I have a couple of things to share. In terms of housekeeping, during the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. The top of the window has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. And we'll be making a note of questions posed there, and these will be answered if time allows at the end of the session. If time doesn't allow, then responses will be posted on the CAS forum and across CAS social media channels. The hashtag for this event is hashtag CAS Virtual 21. So please remember to tweet. And as a reminder, all attendees are in listen-only mode. So without further ado, please let me introduce the panel. First of all, we have Mandy, who served as an advisor in the first Royal Society report on computing at schools, and also contributed to the first draft of the computing curriculum. She was recently appointed as the Cambridge and East Northants NCCE Computing Hub Lead. Also joining us this afternoon, we have James Gardner, who has been the head of computer science at Westcliff High School for Girls for 7 years and is the subject lead for the NCCE London and Essex Computing Hub. And the final person on our panel this afternoon is Adam Gibson. And Adam is an experienced teacher of computer science, having delivered the subject at A-level for almost 25 years and at GCSE since its inception. He is the hub lead for the NCCE Norfolk Computing Hub. As I know, they're very excited to be delivering this session at the CAS Virtual Showcase 2021. So I'm going to hand over to Adam first. Thanks, Adam.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the welcome there, Wendy, and just reminding everyone how old I am and how long I've been teaching the subject. So welcome everyone to this session. So we are going to be focusing on the transition, progression and assessment through some of our courses, but I'm just going to do a brief intro to what the NCCE, the National Centre for Computing Education is. So as Wendy said, I'm a hub lead, as is Mandy, and James is heavily involved with his computing hub too. We're approaching the end of our second year as national computing hubs, and essentially we're tasked with raising the profile of computing through providing a world-class education in the subject for every young person in England. That's the core purpose of the NCCE. And the strategy of doing that is through working with schools from everything from CPD, helping with curriculum, and providing an all-round support package. So the NCCE is made up of STEM, Raspberry Pi and BCS, all those organisations bringing strengths to the NCC arena. And we provide, between the 40 hubs, we provide a wraparound support package for every teacher and therefore every young person from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 5. And it's not just teachers, it's every stakeholder within a school can benefit from the NCC offer. So we're going to assume some degree of familiarity with the NCCE, but if you have questions about what the NCCE are following the session, obviously, then please do pose them to us. If we don't have time at the end, then the path for you to find out more is by your local computing hub, and you'll be able to find all those details and more information on teachcomputing.org. So we are going to tell you about some of the courses that are on offer, and we're not going to go into a huge amount of details about things like the bursaries and the fact they're all free and so on, and what actually can you benefit from as a school financially. But we are going to be focusing on, as we say, the progression, assessment and transition. So as well as providing that world-class education for young people in England, one of the things that the drive from the DfE is to fill the gap in employment in the technology sector. And in order to do that, one of the things that the intentions is to make computer science the fastest growing subject in England. And at the moment, it's happening in pockets, and we're making some excellent progress with thousands of teachers have been trained. I'm just looking at the figures for an update, and it's been very successful. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the courses that we offer, and we hope it'll generate some questions from you. So I'm going to hand over to Mandy, who's going to do the first part on our courses. Mandy.
My microphone was muted. That was so typical. Can you see my screen, Adam? Okay, lovely, thanks. So I'm going to be, this is my contribution today. I'm making the assumption that many of you are active in computing education already, which is a dangerous assumption, but you've got to make something about you've got to make some kind of assumption about your audience, and that you already know about the NCCE core courses and possibly also about the Computer Science Accelerator Certificate. Hopefully you've already completed it, or at least are on your way. So I'm going to be talking about courses which are enhancing CS teaching, if you like. So the next steps and perhaps some new resources that you may have missed if you started this journey a little while ago. One of the first things I'm going to talk about is just in case you missed this, are the new guides that have come out to the Teach Computing curriculum. I'm excited by the Teach Computing curriculum, which is slightly different from, and I'll go into that in a little bit, but slightly different from the original computing curriculum that was produced for various reasons. But this guide is literally supporting the comprehensive collection of materials which have been produced to support 500 hours of teaching, facilitating the delivery of the entire computing curriculum from Key Stage 1 to 4. And as you probably know, it was created by Raspberry Pi on behalf of NCCE. All the content's free and you can edit it as much as you like. You can do whatever, you can make it better, you can reduce it, you can share it, you can do anything you like with it really, because it's under open government license. The materials are suitable for all pupils, irrespective of their skills and background. And the aims of the curriculum are to reduce your workload, show the breadth and depth, demonstrate how computing can be taught well, and highlight areas for subject knowledge and pedagogy. So coming back to talking a little bit about the curriculum. So this is a comparison of the original national curriculum in the two nice blue columns there in nice blue lines. And I did originally, I said rigid and boring. How rude of me. I'm sure that it wasn't boring when it was delivered by wonderful teachers. However, I would say that I get excited when I look at the Teach Computing curriculum because it's broad, because it is varied, because it's rich. It's a spiral it's a spiral curriculum, so that you know that if students have gone through this from Key Stage 1 through 2, 3 and 4, that they're constantly revisiting and deepening their understanding and their knowledge. It also is great for being able to deliver this curriculum cross curricular, which I think, I don't know about you, but I started teaching ICT way back. which is one of the reasons I got so involved in trying to produce a computing curriculum and computing at schools. Nothing mean about ICT. Mustn't say anything. But one of the things that I was responsible for was taking as many elements as I possibly could from the ICT curriculum and working with teachers in my school to deliver that through lots of different subjects. And so this curriculum also allows that, particularly these elements of it, the creating media, design and development, safety and security, effective use of tools, and also perhaps impact of technology. So these elements of our curriculum could be used in many other different subjects, which is great because I'm seeing that there's a real reduction in the number of hours being given to Key Stage 3 computing from the schools that I'm talking to. So if we can deliver some of these through other subjects, we're on a winner for the students. And so I also promised some of these kind of opportunities to take deep dive into those into that curriculum and to look at how to yes, I think one of the things that I really wanted to say here was I wanted to talk about Key Stage 3 in particular, and I wanted to talk about how there is a real strength in using this creative computing idea. We did that at the school where our hub is based, Chesterton Community College, and we have proven this theory by increasing, having an increase of 14% in girls taking up GCSE this year in computer science. Our teachers simply went, our teachers from computer science went on the creative computing modules and redesigned the curriculum a little bit for Key Stage 3, and they had this immediate impact, which I think is really exciting, and I think is one that I certainly want to follow up in other schools. I'm not talking through very specifically because I'm hoping that you can see the screen and that you can see the different courses that are here. The links that are on each of these slides take you to these documents where I've just summarized very specifically what these progressive Key Stage 3 courses. And making a rather kind of awkward jump to assessment, partly because James later is going to show you, talk you through one course which I didn't find, and which should be here, but is not here, but it looks really good. So one of the things that I was looking for was I was looking for some of our courses which include ED, because ED is one of the is really the platform for assessment that's recommended through Teach Computing, and that it does take a little time to get used to and to work out how to really get the most out of it. It is quite interesting in that the questions that have been included on this platform from Computing at Schools, from the original quantum computing project that Computing at Schools ran way back when, those have the deepest feedback and most useful feedback, I think. But you can find these for yourselves by going through some of their courses. And these are, that was just a little GIF that they produced for their help document, help page. But here they've got a whole various collections of questions which you can use for assessing your students and finding out how they're doing. And in order to get the best out of that, there are a bunch of courses to help with using those materials and others in terms of looking at assessment and finding out how to get the best out of any kinds of resources that are around, and there are a lot. But I think that there's been a focus at NCCE to use diagnostic questions so that students also get really good feedback from what they're doing. Okay, I think it is me. That is me. I am done. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to hand you over to
me.
To Adam.
To me, Mandy, that's right, correct.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. So I'm going to get straight on with something I think that's a challenge for all schools, and hopefully give you some context that will be useful. So I'm talking about the inclusion of non-specialist teachers delivering a subject, which is, nothing new, and something that is not necessarily going to disappear. And I'm saying that like as a negative thing, and in my view it isn't, and it doesn't have to be. So one of the courses we run is supporting non-specialists at Key Stage 3. It's called Key Stage 3 Computer Science for the Non-Specialist. So Mandy, like myself, we used to teach ICT back in the day, when it was still thought of as, spreadsheets and doing PowerPoints and things like that. Obviously, those things are still important. I think one of the misconceptions is the new curriculum amongst non-specialists doesn't include those things anymore, because a lot of criticism in the media about people leaving school without those digital skills. And so the purpose of me highlighting with this paragraph is just say it isn't just computing. Computing includes computer science, which is programming, computational thinking, and so on. But it also includes what we consider information technology, and then a greater emphasis on digital literacy. So what we're finding, and Mandy and James will speak for their hubs, but what I'm finding at the moment is I'm getting approached by head teachers who are saying, we've got an NQT joining us in September that they'd like to do, or they're willing to do. I'd like might be strong, but they've shown an interest in doing some computing, and can you help us? So we signpost them to this course. And it really is a course designed for the non-specialists. So having said that, we've had some specialists. So, people who've been teaching ICT but might not have ventured strictly into computing may classify as a specialist, but this actually aligns their knowledge, pedagogy and content with the computing curriculum and the new elements that form part of the computing curriculum. So I think one of the things that's important with teachers who are teaching at Key Stage 3 is knowing where the students who are arriving are coming from in terms of their computing, and also where they're off to on GCSE. And Mandy's already said that the teach computer resources, it's a spiral model. And one of the things this course does is gives them clarity to teachers of the subject. It gives them context as well as clarity about what pupils will have done before, what they're doing with them, and how that fits into the sequence from Key Stage 1 all the way to GCSE, and also importantly where it doesn't. So this is a couple of examples of slides of the main elements of the course. So programming, for example, certainly colleagues who taught as non-specialists in my department before had very little knowledge and very little way of gaining that knowledge about what pupils had done at primary school. And so it's good for them to know that expectations about, have they done programming? Can they write algorithms? Can they look at some code, whether it's written in a high level language or some blocks, and work out what's going on? And that's part of the pedagogical model that lots of schools are using to deliver programming and computational thinking, which is called PRIM, which we're not going into here. But this course does give colleagues a pedagogical method for delivering these things, knowing that they're telling pupils things in the context of a way of learning they've heard before. So you can see here programming is significant in Key Stage 2, and then by the time pupils get to Key Stage 3, their requirement is that they do some block programming, and they can do high-level language textual, which typically now would be Python. So there's some progression demonstrated there through the key stages, and this is also present in algorithms, which is obviously very close to programming, being computational thinking. So we've got, even as early as Key Stage 1, pupils are knowing about what the word algorithm is, and then Key Stage 2, what's happening. And by the time non-specialists are teaching them at Key Stage 3, you know, non-specialists have a good understanding of where these pupils are coming from. Then we also talk about what isn't included at Key Stage 1. So we're giving context and clarity. This particular example is about networks. You know, what are pupils expected to know, and how can we teach them about this? This is all backed up with the Teach Computing resources and the relevant units for those. And then lastly, the last example from the slides I'm showing you is about data representation, which most people will say is about binary. And those non-specialists who learn how to teach binary and representation of images and sound and so on, we go into the course all the skills they need to be able to do that. And it's actually quite involved, but once they've been on the course, the feedback is overwhelmingly positive, that they have, you know, a newfound confidence in it. And actually what Year 7s are doing in data representation in many schools is exactly the same as what they're doing at GCSE, and binary addition, for example. Okay, so then Mandy talked about the spirality of the curriculum, and you know, at Key Stage 3, I thought it was good to have a bit of context. So this is data representation again, and we can see over the curriculum plan, Year 7, 8, and 9, how that's fitting in to our 3-year model of delivery, and how it fits into GCSE, because that's just something that hasn't always been as evident as it is now, is what students are doing at GCSE, where have they come from. So by the, you know, we would be confident that our new GCSE students in Year 10 will already be able to do a lot of the data representation stuff, and that is a significant improvement in where we were 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm just going to end with 2 things before I hand over to James, which is just to say we do focus on this course also in information technology, because we still got to keep that at the forefront of what pupils are doing, and you know, being able to use tools purposefully, and you know, still be the people that lots of employers and educators want the young people to be, and that includes digital literacy as being, you know, socially responsible, good consumers and users of IT and computing and all the related equipment and technology. So it is a very well-rounded course. It's a 1-day course. It's an absolute must for any non-specialists and any converter non-specialists who might have been doing ICT for 10, 15 years and want to find out a bit more about, you know, the new curriculum. So that's the end of that very brief intro to that course. James is going to talk to you about another course now, which is one which I delivered last week actually to some very experienced colleagues, and it was very well received. There's something for everyone from the NCCE offer, and James is going to tell you about some of those very experienced colleagues, what they might benefit. Okay, over to you, James.
Thanks, Adam. Right, can you see my screen? Perfect. Okay, so this is, as Adam said, it's a short excerpt of a course which the NCCE have put together, which is meeting the challenge of the exam, and it's retrieval practice, which is quite big at the moment. Lots of schools are starting to use retrieval practice as techniques, and also we'll look at picking up some of those marks in the exams and just some easy ways that they can be picked up. by students. So there's one thing that I've got to put on here. I'm in a bit of an interesting situation. I spent 9 years teaching first ICT to primary school and then computing to primary school before stepping back into secondary. So I've actually now seen the progression from Key Stage 1 right the way through to Key Stage 5. So a bit of a strange situation, but it definitely puts me in that position to be able to see where the students have come from and where they should be going. So retrieval practice at the moment is key. Current form of linear examinations in Key Stage 4, students need to be able to retrieve content from throughout the course at those key examination moments. And Tom Sherrington from the Chartered College of Teaching, he observed that learning does not miraculously sink in. It's essential to use retrieval methods routinely, low stakes quizzing, practice routines, and lots of different tools. And we'll just go through at least one of those and a couple of things that you probably already do without thinking about it. So one thing that we could do is we could use a retrieval challenge grid. And then we've got some questions that we might put up as a starter and then go over them as a plenary. So we've got questions which are going to be quite easy for them in pink. So these are things that they may have done in the last lesson. And then last week, we might have our questions there in yellow a couple of weeks ago. And then we could go even further back, maybe even to the beginning of term or to the end of last term. And of course, maybe as a plenary, we can then sort of give those answers, maybe mini whiteboards, some way of actually then being able to retrieve things that they have been through before. It's not the only way of doing things. We go through other ways of doing things like that in the course, but you might have already used things like Kahoot, Quizlet, flashcards. Those sort of things already have been used and are being used in classrooms all around the country anyway. So there are forms of retrieval practice you are probably already doing. Along with retrieval practice, one of the other key things that makes it quite useful is interleaving. So interleaving allows us to, instead of teaching a topic as a full block, it allows us to split that topic up. So we're teaching several topics and breaking them up. And what that means is that it allows the topics to be revisited and the content to be spaced, which allows students to revisit knowledge over a longer period of time. So you could have an example of it as it is there. So instead of teaching it blocked, the whole of topic A, whether it's networks, then the whole of topic B, whether that's systems architecture, we could then split that up. So we're actually teaching bits of those different topics all along the way as we go through a term. Obviously, we're going into a lot more detail about interleaving and retrieval practice in the full course, but 10 minutes as opposed to 5 hours worth of course, you can only get through so much. What we could do is if we sort of look at a way that you could plan it in.
I think we've lost James.
Do you want me to pick up there?
We could have an example here. We've got the CPU architecture, your lessons. Register and buses is being taught as a main part of the first lesson.
I think we're losing you, James, unfortunately. I don't know if Adam, if you can continue.
Yeah, I can. Obviously, I haven't got James's slides, but I've delivered the course several times. So I'm happy to just to pick up on there. So what James is going to. I think what James's next couple of slides would be the actual evidence for the blocked and interleaving results, and actually the research behind it is pretty phenomenal. And on the course, we look at what teachers are doing in terms of delivery when we do a blocked approach and an interleaved approach. And even having taught for a long time, I found it quite unnerving, that departure to do a truly interleaved approach. But the examples of the statistics at the end really do show just the impact that approach can have. So the course then goes on to talk very specifically about retrieval questioning, and it's a very good methodology of introducing that and then embedding it where it's already introduced. So just to give you an example, like I said, I did the course last week. We ran it for a Multi-Academy Trust in Norfolk, and we had 8 colleagues on it. And a couple have been emailing me backwards and forwards today with information they wanted about some of the questions we were talking about. And you know, it's such a good methodology for delivery. Not anything, you know, fantastically new. It just really does highlight it to the subject. One of the challenges we've got at Computing GCSE is that on average students achieve half a grade less than they do in their other subjects. Obviously, as Mandy said, you know, some schools are reducing the amount of contact time at Key Stage 3. That can't be helping, and also often in schools computing goes into the 4 hours a fortnight blocks rather than the 5 hours. You know, that's not helping either. So we look at ways to minimize the impact of losing that time. And one of the things we do, one of the last sessions, is some of the formulas that we can help pupils apply to some of the, for example, algorithm questions and things like that. Do this to get that mark, do that to get that mark. Well, I'm not talking about you know, training like an exam factory. Is giving them that understanding of how we can get some of those easier marks. So it's a top-notch course designed for people who are going to be teaching GCSE, but you know, importantly, those who've been teaching for a long time. Because if you can help your students get an extra 2 or 3 marks in a paper, you know, it's an absolutely a few hours well spent on that course. It's a really good one. Okay, so I hope I sort of finished off what James might have been saying, and hopefully we might have a few questions.
And right on cue, James has come back. Hi, James. No problem. Adam took over. I don't know if you want to resume what you were saying and finish off.
James, what I said was that I just went through the end of the course and the evidence, and then how we work on the last bit on picking up the odd question, the odd point mark in the exams, and how beneficial that was. Okay.
Yeah, I think if I can just add to that, I think the other thing I was going to talk about, but I mean we'll move on. There's also some bits in there about answering pseudocode questions, which are a key way of students suddenly just losing marks on an exam. And it sort of just breaks it down into, you know, look for these key words. And I think that's a really key thing. And the other thing as well about that course, which I think, Adam, you'll probably agree with, is sort of giving some ideas about how to answer the 6 mark and 8 mark extended writing questions, which again, some students just look at that exam page and go, it's blank. And that's when, you know, they sweat and they go to pieces on it. So giving them those tools before you even get into the exam, I think is so key. But thank you, Adam. I think
it's the contextualizing it to computing, especially the longer answer questions, because they don't get any extended writing questions very often, and we, you know, as teachers we tend to not give that enough attention. So this does highlight that.
I'm marking exams at the moment, so I can't speak, but because it's heartbreaking how sometimes you just go, look, all we need to do is to teach X, Y, and Z, and you would have got all of those marks. Anyway, go on. Moving on.
Okay. Just to say thank you, Adam, thank you, Mandy and James, for your presentations, and thanks, James, for coming back. I know it's not easy. Sometimes, you know, the Wi-Fi goes down and you lose connectivity. So thank you for rejoining and just summarising your points at the end there. Thanks, Beverly. I'm going to hand over to you now for a couple of questions to bring to the panel. Oh. We haven't got any sound from you, Beverly, sorry. Let's try that again. There we go.
I should know better with the sound. I've unmuted myself, so hopefully you can hear me now. So, okay, this is technical glitches from computer people. Just to echo Wendy, and thank you everyone for presenting today and everyone who's joined us today. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is coming from Tom. And he's just asking, which course is James discussing? So I think he'd like a course name there.
Yeah, it's the, hang on, I'll just bring it up on my screen now. It's got a long name, that's the problem. It's the higher attainment in GCSE computer science, meeting the challenges of the exams. All of our courses have got like CP or CH in front of them. It's 439. It might be easier to find it by the number.
I'll just type that in. What's the number?
439. So CP 439. Then depending on where in the country, it's a different code. But
okay, I'll share that with him through the question window. And he's just replied, brilliant, thank you. So he's got that also, and I've messaged it to him. We've also got another one about the interleaving technique, and it says, is this interleaving technique, is it to teach the contents or just a revision technique?
Adam, what would you say? I mean, I would say that
okay, so I think the idea with the interleaving is that it does mean that we've got that consistency of students retrieving answers right from the start of the course. So, you know, one of the models, for example, is, you know, we're talking about CPU architecture to give some context. And in the lesson one, we're asking about what the components are. The second lesson, we might be asking about what the purpose of the components are. The lesson three, we might go back to what the components are. So I think it's linked to, well, I know it's linked to the forgetting curve. And, you know, the forgetting curve, as soon as you teach students something, they forget. Well, next lesson you ask them some questions, and we get up and up we go, so we don't leave it to the end to revision. You know, I'm sure we've all found ourselves saying to students, the only difference between us and them is that, well, in lots of ways, is that, you know, we've revisited so much of the material so often we can't forget it if we want, and that's what we're trying to replicate, is that you know, familiarization and just embedding it. So that's what that goes into, and it gives you some practical, you know, takeaway ideas for doing it, and you also get the opportunity to generate an interleaving grid, you know, properly within the course.
Okay, thank you very much. And that was some Tasleem's. Hopefully that's answered the question. There's another one's coming, which is what's the best practice for retrieval practice?
The best practice.
Yes.
So okay, so if we've talked about Tom Sherrington, we'll all know, hopefully the Tom at the beginning wasn't Tom Sherrington, because I'm going to talk about him. But so one of the ideas is, you know, if you have the OCR J276 question spreadsheet, okay, so if you don't know what that is, you can find out. That's the J276 MCQ question spreadsheet. You can then put every lesson 5 questions in at the beginning of your lesson, and then at the end of the lesson another 5 questions. And if you have 4 hours a fortnight, which would be common, you know, by the time students have finished their GCSE course in 5 terms, they've had 1,200 questions. So an obvious criticism of this method of doing core knowledge retrieval at the beginning of a lesson and at the end of a lesson is, well, what about the time? Well, I think the evidence would say it's time you can't afford not to give to reminding students and reteaching little bits and pieces that cover some of those misconceptions. So, you know, for example, if you're not a computing teacher, this might not mean anything to you, but if you get an exam question and it's a binary addition, it says explain your answer, the answer is an overflow error. There's nothing else. You know, what is the purpose of RAM? It's to store data instructions currently in use. Students lose that mark if they don't have currently in use, which is emboldened in mark schemes. You know, we're drilling students so they've got that knowledge. Obviously they need to apply it and contextualize it in other questions, but it's giving them that foundation. And if we start doing it, you know, in year 7, so I think the question was, you know, what's the best way? Well, my answer to that would be start it in year 7. You know, just that I mean, we like lots of schools have a whole school approach to it. Every lesson students are getting 5 questions and they like it. It's actually a quiz, you know, and we don't, you know, I don't like the term quiz for that. We just call it recall questions. They're so drilled into it and it makes such a difference. So yeah, consistent application.
Thank you, Adam. I'd certainly agree with that for my own teaching practice and using questions, the same types of questions in year 7 all the way through. So this isn't a surprise to happen in year 11 or something that starts in year 10. It's about a consistent practice throughout. So you're gearing your learners up to be totally successful at that final attainment stage. There aren't any further questions, so once again, thank you for that. What I'll do is hand back to Wendy for further summarizations.
Thanks, Beverly. And just to say thank you so much again to the panel for this session. And at the end of this webinar, a short survey will appear on screen, and we'd be grateful if you take a minute to complete it. A recording of this webinar will be available on the CAS YouTube channel after the session. And the CAS Virtual Showcase will return tomorrow with sessions on cross-curricular computing on the primary track and moving from GCSE to A-level for secondary teachers. We hope to see you at other sessions in the summer showcase, and please do continue to spread the word about computing at school. Thank you so much for joining, and have a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.